Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. And as the old saying goes, like what you like, don't be a dick. Let's begin. NXT this week begins with a match in the interim cruiserweight title tournament as Isiah Swerve Scott takes on Elio del Fantasma. Some good lucha things, so to speak, to start this match off, and some great cinematic shots as well. Kind of very good blocking and posing as the match begins early on. I like how throughout the match, Fantasma will point and gesture to the championship belt sitting on its very fancy table to show how much he wants it. In the end, though, Swerve is able to win the matchup after a very creative roll-up, so now he and Fantasma are both 1-1 in the tournament so far. Fun opener. Then after the match, Scott cutting a promo afterwards saying he needs this championship more than anyone else. Drake Maverick would disagree. We get a pre-tape promo from Dominik Dijakovic, who says the Garganos talk a lot of trash but have no respect, and we'll see how much Johnny's talking next week when he faces Dijakovic in a match. Meanwhile, back at the arena, we see Fantasma once again fighting off the Lucha Kidnappers. Where's this going to lead? What's this all mean? Is Fantasma actually cover up? Is he the one behind all these abductions? Time will tell. Next match sees Candice LeRae accompanied by Johnny Gargano and her cool new theme music versus Kacy Catanzaro. The Titantron for Candice now says pint-sized poison instead of pixie, but the font makes it look like it says Pokin, P-O-K-O-N, not P-O-I-S-O-N. The font is very confusing there. Gargano is like the hype man for Candice here. He's got a live mic and just putting her over constantly. It is adorable and hilarious at the same time. Candice very aggressive here. Ultimately, she wins with the Wicked Stepsister, which is a version of the curb stop, essentially. Fun story, I actually took that move in one of my first matches from a wrestler I was working. I didn't know that was the move he was going to do, though. I thought he was like doing a surfboard at first, the way he was pulling back, so I just kind of like reared back for it, not expecting a stomp, so I come down and my chin, bam, hits the mat really hard. I've not been able to chew the same ever since. Anyway, after the match, though, Candice puts the Gargano escape on Kacy to really just kind of rub it in, and Gargano is just so smitten with the new evil Candice LeRae. I love Gargano's new shtick here. Damien Priest cutting a promo backstage saying he will finally finish the job he started months ago, and that after tonight, Keith Lee will bask in his glory as the new North American champion. We then go to, in my opinion, what is the best part of this whole episode of NXT, as you see Tim Thatcher and Matt Riddle on the stage, and Matt Riddle says he knows Tim like the back of his hand, if he knew the back of his hand for 2 weeks. And so it's time for the NEWLYBRO show, and suddenly a game show breaks out. Tim Thatcher looks dreadfully confused by all this. He's just so perturbed and almost disdainful at what's going on here. So Matt Riddle is doing this game show thing. Byron Saxton coming in, and he's looking very game show host. He's got no ties, got the shirt unbuttoned and everything. He looks very 70s here with his shiny ass suit, and Thatcher's just going, what's going on here? And so the whole thing is like they're asked the same question. Thatcher writes something down, or I should say Riddle writes something down on a whiteboard, and Thatcher just answers deadpan, and it happens to be the same thing. They just keep getting the answers right every time. But then as they go to the speed round, out come Eichner and Bartel from Imperium to jump the tag team champions. They beat them up real good, and they hold the NXT tag titles up high. I'm surprised there were no booing sound effects from like the canned audience reaction that we saw throughout the whole segment. Also, I guess that the NXT UK tag titles aren't worth fighting for right now, which is why Imperium's going after these. I thought this was an amazing segment. It was so silly and stupid, and I absolutely loved it. I want to see more of just like the dichotomy of Riddle and Thatcher, and it's just, it works for me right now. That's all I'm going to say. Adam Cole cutting a promo backstage on the fact he's going to be defending his NXT Championship against Velveteen Dream next week. He said, it's pretty to-the-point promo. He says the Dream will be over for Velveteen, and there's no one around who can possibly dispute that claim. Mia Yim taking on Charlotte Flair in non-title action next. The big story here, of course, is something they've been building up for the last couple of weeks, that Mia Yim's first NXT match was against Charlotte 6 years ago, and of course now their careers are in very different places, and so history kind of repeats itself at this point. It's a good story here, and Yim showing some heart and some courage, but ultimately Charlotte's just too strong. They're trading verbal barbs at each other as well throughout the matchup. Charlotte wins the figure 8, and then after she's done with that, right away out comes Io Shirai, the number 1 contender, who just shouts at Charlotte in Japanese for a bit and then says that next week she is hers. So we have the title match set for next week. Should be a very interesting match. Speaking of next week, we find out that Karrion Kross and Scarlett will be making their presence known, and so next week's looking pretty stacked right right now. And then we see backstage elsewhere, Candice, LeRae, and Johnny Gargano rub it in Kacy Catanzaro's face as she's getting checked on by a medic. And then we see Dexter Loomis versus Shane Thorn in singles action. You can count on one hand the number of times Dexter Loomis is referred to by anything but his full name. Even Shane Thorn's referred to by his last name a couple of times in this matchup. Anyway, Shane starts out strong, but it doesn't even phase Loomis. In the end, there's the big side slam into the arm triangle, and Shane passes out. Great visual, too, of Shane like fighting it. You can see it in his eyes. It just fades out. So yeah, Loomis looking very strong here. More questions than answers when it comes to this very bizarre character. Keith Lee cutting a promo on Damian Priest with a very raspy voice after the attack he suffered to the throat last week. Second time this week we heard someone mispronounce the word larynx, and he basically says that Damian Priest says he wants to live in infamy. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen. The beating he gives him tonight will live in infamy. Then we go to the Cruiserweight title tournament once again as Drake Maverick takes on Tony Nese. We see last week after the matchup that they had Jake Atlas giving Maverick a pep talk. This match was like, it was a good story, almost kind of uncomfortable to watch that early on because the way that Maverick is selling all this offense is just he's screaming and crying out in pain. Like he's really getting injured here. And then Nese is just rubbing it in and like almost bullying him in a way verbally. Kind of like, oh, you're going to cry? What are you going to do? You're fighting for your career, man. Finally, Drake can stand no more. He fights back very valiantly. He ends up from the top rope hitting this kind of like wheelbarrow into a bulldog from the top rope to win. So now Drake is 1-1. He has a very passionate promo after the match where he says he still has this thing going. He's going to win that championship. He's going to win the tournament. He's very psyched about this. So it makes you feel good that he's still in the fight. But again, it's just the whole like, you know, the fact that he's released, that he's still in this match. You know, if you want to hear more about what I said about it last week, go consult that because I'm not going to repeat myself. In your main event, Damian Priest challenges Keith Lee for the North American Championship. And for weeks now, Priest has been calling out Lee, saying that Lee's been ducking him, choosing lesser opponents for title matches and everything. Finally, Priest taking things into his own hands with that nightstick attack he's been doing like on Dijakovic and on Lee here, attacking him in the throat a couple times last week, all leading up to this match. And this is about as physical and hard hitting as you can expect. Lots of big boy strength on display here from both guys. At one point, Keith Lee doing a tornado dive to the outside onto Damien. At the end, though, Priest finally grabs the nightstick. He's going to attack Keith with it, but Keith blocks it and just yells, "I am limitless," like the anime character he is. And he takes the nightstick away from Priest, hands it to the referee, hits not one, but two straight spirit bombs to win and retain to close out the show. This was a great main event, and I just love these kind of like car crash matches with the two just big dudes just beating the hell out of each other. Very hard-hitting stuff, some big old slams. I loved it. Keith Lee continues to impress me every single time he's out there, and Damian Priest did a very good job too. This week's Dynamite begins with the semifinal match in the TNT Championship Tournament as Cody takes on Darby Allin. Very interesting rivalry they've had in the last year because, of course, at Fyter Fest, they wrestled the time limit draw, and then on New Year's Day, they had a rematch, which Cody won. Early in the match, Darby accidentally takes out Brandi on the outside, like running her into the barricade. So she's gone for a little bit as Darby works Cody's knee throughout. Brandi comes back with a bottle of water, and Jericho on commentary is like, "What you got in that bottle? Is she going to throw acid in Darby's face?" It's just regular water, though, anyway. The two use each other's finishers at one point. Like Cody hits or I should say, Darby hits the crossroads first. Cody then later goes to the coffin drop, but Darby counters it. Then he hits his own coffin drop. He connects with it, but Cody's able to roll through and actually pin Darby in the end to win the match and advance to the finals of the tournament. This was a really fun opener, a great match, a great way to open the show. What I liked about the finish was, you know, Darby losing wasn't done in a way that made him look bad. He was very competitive, really put Cody to the limit here, but Cody, the wily veteran, was able to outsmart Darby just a little bit at the end. So no, Darby doesn't look bad in defeat here. And so, yeah, like I said, great opener. We get part 2 of the Scorpio Sky vignette where it talks briefly about him joining SCU. He's chosen to be the third guy to help Kazarian and Christopher Daniels and everything to form the group, and how he was so nervous at first, but then like when being the elite took off, how he gained more confidence and felt he really belonged. And then he talks about just basically how he was able to challenge Jericho for the AEW Championship not too long ago, and how he's not content with just being there. there. He wants to be the best. He wants to be a legend. I thought it was very interesting. They did 2 weeks of Scorpio Sky vignettes and specifically singling him out, not talking about SCU as a whole, but just focusing more on Scorpio Sky. It suggests to me that they want to do something with Scorpio at some point in the future, maybe as a single star. Maybe at one point SCU will dissolve and you'll have Scorpio getting this singles push. I'd like to see it, but we shall see where it all ends up. MJF with another injury update saying that his hangnail is not only healed, it has overhealed, giving him the strongest nail on earth, basically. But he was getting himself TV ready and he nicked his neck and he takes off his scarf to reveal a big old neck brace to cover it. He says he will be back because he's a fighter and the people want to see him. I mean, this is just a great promo. Then we see Wardlow in action against Musa, the newcomer. He shows some life against Wardlow during the match, but it's pretty academic. It's a big old squash and Wardlow just destroys him. It's time for the third installment of the Bubbly Bunch, and this week's theme is the Manitoba Melee, as Chris Jericho calls it, where it's basically the members of the Inner Circle fight each other through their phone, where like they'll hit the phone, it cuts to the next member, and they're selling the attack, and then they attack the phone, it cuts to the next guy, and after the Inner Circle guys are done, we then start just devolving to other wrestlers, or other cameos from guys like Jungle Boy and Dr. Luther and Sonny Kiss, and then we start seeing celebrity guests appear, like Jericho's father, Ted Irvine, and Lou Ferrigno with a taser for some reason. And we see comedian Brad Williams and the Cripple Threat. We see Jay and Silent Bob. We see Gabriel Iglesias. And finally, we see Vicky Guerrero at the end. And then Jericho calls it off, and that's where it ends. And the whole thing, though, just the transfer of guy from wrestler to wrestler and everything, the way it just kept breaking down, I thought was hilarious. I want to see, like, here's the thing. I know last week they tried doing the Flim Flam Challenge and trying to get people on social media to do it. I don't know how well that took off because I know they didn't mention the Flim Flam Challenge at all this week, but maybe they can get Manitoba Melee over. I would love to see some people get involved. That I would be part of the Manitoba Melee. I want to try and be part of that if they make it like a social media thing. In a no DQ tag team match, the Best Friends take on Jimmy Havoc and Kip Sabian, and right away things just break down to weapons. Jimmy Havoc throws a chair at Orange Cassidy and takes him out for the bulk of the match. Havoc shines a lot in this match. I haven't seen him get this much time to really shine in his own element since like the Cracker Barrel match they had last year, that triple threat match. This was just a lot of wild mayhem. Chairs and ladders were the name of the game here, and they were used with aplomb the entire match. At one point, like Trent is slammed onto like a chair structure in the middle of the ring, like spine first, and then Sabian stomps onto it from the top rope. There's a pile driver on a chair at one point, but then Penelope Ford breaks up the pin, kind of lessens the impact of the pile driver. But anyway, Orange Cassidy comes back and he fights back and he dives onto Sabian and Penelope on the outside. That frees up Chucky T to hit the Awful Waffle, that running pile driver onto Havoc on a big pile of chairs to win the match. This is just a wild match. Lots of crazy moves, really fun to watch in kind of a gruesome kind of way if you like that sort of thing. If you don't like the weapons matches, then fair point to you, I guess, but if you like this sort of kind of wild action, this is actually really fun to watch. We get another installment of Dr. Britt Baker in her office telling people how to be a role model, and you could tell from like episode 1 to 2 in this one, she's gone totally overboard and has adorned her office with motivational posters featuring herself and like footage of herself on the big screen on AEW Dynamite and everything. She has a dedicated makeup lady for her videos, and she calls her Reba. Turns out it's Rebel, who is formerly of TNA, who you can tell is grinning and bearing it, dealing with Britt's stuff here. And Britt's pretty funny here, and she really chews out Tony Schiavone, makes fun of his appearance a lot, which is kind of rude, but she's a heel, so there, I guess it's okay, I guess. But the whole thing I thought was pretty entertaining, and just seeing the dynamic with like having Rebel involved as well, which is kind of a surprise cameo. It was kind of funny. But yeah, I thought it was just good stuff. And again, Britt leaning into the whole like role model character and the whole like just egotistical, like I'm a dentist, I'm a doctor, so I'm better than you kind of thing. I thought it was pretty entertaining. Shawn Spears taking on Baron Black in a bit of a squash match. This is the first time in the show where I noticed, are there more fans that are in the room that we just don't see making all this noise? Because you'll hear all this noise as the match goes on, but when you cut to actually see the fans in the background, like they're not doing anything. Like there's the heel side, there's definitely a dedicated like heel and face side of the crowd from what you can see on camera. And the heel side, they're not making noise, but you hear the babyface side making noise, and there's like no one moving around. Are there people on the hard cam side we just don't ever see? Because I was really confused about that. Are we seeing some WXO sound sweetening or what? Anyway, it's a squash, like I said. Spears the C4 and the sharpshooter to win. I'll tell you what, this whole lockdown thing and just all these like local wrestlers coming in to get squashed is doing wonders for Shawn's record right now. Speaking of squash matches, we see Brody Lee taking on Marco Stunt in a match that was made last week. Really powerful promo by Marco before the match begins, like some pre pre-tape from the week before, talking about how he's fighting to belong in AEW because some people don't think he does belong there. It goes about as well as you might expect for poor Marco. He gets totally destroyed here. He does barely avoid a count-out loss, but he walks right into more damage and devastation from Brody Lee. And that's pretty much where it ends there. So more wins piling up for Brody, and Marco showing that courageous fire, that heart and everything, but still unable to come up on top at the end of the day. We see Jon Moxley, the champ, cutting a promo, talking about how different everything was 8 weeks ago when he won the title from Chris Jericho at Evolution. It is weird, I must say, just like across both NXT and AEW and Raw and SmackDown, whatever, when you see all these highlights of wrestlers like in the crowd and everything, and like how used to it we are now to seeing empty Performance Center or empty Nightmare Factory, it's just a weird experience to go back and say, oh man, it was not that long ago we had capacity crowds at these arenas. So anyway, in his promo, he's talking about how he's going to come back live to AEW next week, and then he wraps it all up by saying, you know, support your local business, be kind to your neighbors, and be sure to call your grandmother. That Jon Moxley, he's a psychopath, but he's always looking out for grandma. In your main event, another semifinal match in the TNT Championship Tournament as Lance Archer takes on Dustin Rhodes. Archer keeping his streak alive of beating up somebody on his way to the ring. This time it's Justin Law who comes barreling out of the entranceway getting beat up. Poor Justin. Anyway, this is just a knockdown, drag-out fight here. Dustin gets bloodied early on from a chair, and from the whole thing, it's like I said, it's just a big fight. At one point, Dustin hits the Nightmare kick, the big Shattered Dreams kick onto Archer, which I thought was like a disqualification offense, but it turns out it's not the case, and Archer just shrugs it off anyway. Dustin even hits the Crossroads at one point, and Archer kicks out at 1, which no one's done to this point. And speaking of things that no one has done or things you don't really see that often, Archer not only walks across the top rope Undertaker style, he also hits a moonsault off the top rope. We get a kick out from that though. But yeah, Dustin's getting the crap beat out of him at this point. He's just unable to fight back. We get some choke slams, and then at one point you see QT Marshall and Cody show up with a towel, and Dustin wants no part of that, don't throw in the towel. Archer drags him back in the ring, just slams his head into the mat repeatedly for a pinfall to win, and so he will go on to the finals to face Cody in the match that Jake Roberts wanted from day one in the finals of this tournament. I'm looking forward to that match, but man, what a match this was. This was just so physical, a different kind of physical from what we saw from, like, say, Keith Lee and Damian Priest over at NXT. This is a different kind of physicality. And seeing Archer finally have someone where he has a very competitive match with, like, it wasn't like, he's been working harder, more progressive matches each time. Like, he killed Marco Stunt, he had a somewhat competitive match with Colt Cabana, and then this one was not only much more competitive, but also had a lot of emotion attached to it as well. And it really gets Archer over as this killing machine. And I was blown away by this matchup. Dustin Rhodes always brings it, and just the way that he worked with Archer here was phenomenal. I love this match. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite. This week, my choice is AEW. I will say NXT had a really good show this week. I thought the main event was great. I'm loving Johnny Gargano's new shtick, and I laughed my ass off at the Newly Bro show. But I feel like AEW has consistently been able to put out better of these like empty arena style shows that NXT has, and this one I think was one of the strongest ones they've done so far, if not the best. I felt they've been able to do a lot more variety with like not just the matches, but also their skits and their vignettes, the way they've been kind of like thinking outside the box with some of their delivery and some of like the presentation on some of those. It's just so wildly different and unique from what we're seeing on NXT right now. I thought that the show opened and closed with great tournament matches, especially Archer and Rhodes. The Bubbly Bunch was great. The No DQ tag team match was a welcome surprise. Didn't really expect to see that there. I think, like I said, one of the strongest empty arena dynamites we've seen in quite a while, and the stronger show this week, in my opinion. But let me know what you thought about NXT and AEW this week in the comments section below, and be sure to vote what show you thought was better by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.